Hey guys, tonight we slip into the quiet, dusty corners of history where you, yes you, find yourself wrestling with a concept that sounds simple now, but was a luxury back then: showers. Picture yourself standing in a cramped, dimly lit room, the faint smell of damp clothes and wood smoke thick in the air, and the sound of a distant war machine humming through the walls. Water is a treasure, more precious than gold. And here you are, wondering when the last time was that you felt truly clean. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive the mental image of wartime water rationing without flinching a little. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? I love knowing where you all are as we unwind together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the aftermath of a day in World War II, when simple routines like showers evaporated into memory. Imagine this: your home's water supply is restricted, rationed to a few precious buckets a day. There's no running hot water at the flick of a tap. In many parts of the world during the war, especially in cities under siege or in bombed out areas, water was rationed so severely that the idea of a daily shower was laughable, if not impossible. Women, who traditionally bore the brunt of maintaining household cleanliness, found themselves forced to improvise with what little was available. Bathing became a sporadic event, not a ritual. A basin of water might be shared among several family members, with the same water recycled or used frugally. You might splash a little on your face and hands, or carefully sponge off dirt, all while the sound of distant bombs or air raid sirens hummed through the walls. Historians still argue whether the decline in bathing led to a significant rise in illnesses, or if people's bodies simply adapted to dirtier norms. The absence of showers wasn't just about water scarcity, it was a psychological shift. Imagine the frustration of seeing your pre-war routines evaporate like morning mist, replaced by ration books and strict limitations. You might remember stories of waterless bathing, using powders, rubbing alcohol, or even just a damp cloth to clean oneself. These substitute rituals had an odd intimacy to them, as if everyone was quietly agreeing to accept a new normal, one where the scent of unwashed skin was a badge of endurance. Quirky fringe tidbit alert: some women reportedly took to using diluted vinegar or lemon juice as a cleanser, because it was thought to kill germs, even if it smelled like a tart lemon pie left out in the sun. Not exactly the spa experience you hoped for, but hey, it got the job done. Sort of. Meanwhile, the war effort commandeered much of the nation's water supply for industrial uses, factories, munitions plants, and agricultural irrigation, meaning civilians had to make do with what was left. Women in cities might have queued for hours just to fill a few buckets. The communal bathhouses that existed pre-war often closed or were repurposed for military use, stripping away a vital resource for personal hygiene. You could say the war made you appreciate the little things. A gentle splash of clean water, the smell of fresh soap, a warm bath without having to ration each drop. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we mentioned in another video? Well, this was the era when even water felt as rare and precious as some ancient potion. So, in this first section of our slow dance through wartime hygiene, you get a glimpse of how women faced the loss of simple comforts and adapted to a world where cleanliness was a challenge not just of habit, but of survival. The wartime rationing chaos stretched far beyond just water. It reached into the sudsy heart of cleanliness itself. Soap. You're now living in a world where soap isn't just something you toss in your cart on a whim. It's a strictly rationed commodity, doled out with a cautious eye, and a ration book thicker than a wartime manual. Soap, once abundant and taken for granted, suddenly becomes the centerpiece of hygiene struggles that force women into some truly creative and occasionally questionable cleaning methods. Let's set the scene. Your ration card allows you a tiny amount of soap per week, barely enough for the family to manage, let alone for personal luxuries like regular baths or washing clothes frequently. The government prioritizes soap for soldiers and essential workers, leaving civilians scrambling. This scarcity creates a breeding ground for all sorts of domestic ingenuity, sometimes bordering on the bizarre. Mainstream fact: soap production was drastically cut during the war because fats and oils, key ingredients, were redirected to munitions and other military uses. Soap makers had to improvise with alternative ingredients, resulting in less effective products that left many feeling less than fresh. And here comes the quirky side. Some women resorted to homemade soap substitutes. There are reports of laundry bluing agents being used to freshen clothes, and baking soda becoming a household hero for scrubbing surfaces, and occasionally skin. One curious remedy involved using ashes from burned wood mixed with water to create a primitive, gritty soap. Imagine the sensation, kind of like exfoliating with volcanic grit, but with a smoky aroma to match. Historians still argue whether these alternative methods truly cleaned skin or just masked odors and grime temporarily. After all, cleanliness in wartime was less about luxury and more about health, preventing disease spread in cramped quarters. This shortage also gave rise to soap sharing, which, as you can imagine, was a recipe for awkward social encounters. Women might swap small pieces of soap, or even trade for other essentials, in a shadow market where every clean bar was precious. You probably wouldn't have survived the black market soap deals. Either, rumor has it that some bars contained more filler than cleaning power, sold at steep prices. Soap smugglers were a thing, thriving in the underbelly of wartime economies, but often their products left buyers questioning if they'd just paid for a block of chalk. The impact on personal hygiene habits was profound. With less soap available, many women adjusted by washing only essential areas: faces, hands, underarms, while others simply went longer between full washes. This adjustment led to an entire generation with a different standard of clean that modern noses might find surprising. And yet, despite the challenges, a resilient creativity emerged. Household tips circulated through letters and radio programs, suggesting things like using diluted vinegar for deodorizing or rubbing alcohol as a makeshift cleanser. The resourcefulness was impressive, even if the results were sometimes less than glamorous. So as you imagine yourself here, in the midst of rationing chaos, it's a testament to how essential something as simple as soap is to feeling human, and how war can twist that basic need into a daily struggle. Now, you're slipping into the shadowy world of the black market bath hacks, where official shortages collide with unofficial ingenuity. When official supplies ran dry and ration books were no longer enough, women found themselves plotting clever, sometimes sneaky ways to stay clean, or at least appear so to keep morale high and noses happy. You might find yourself wondering if some of these hacks would make you laugh, cringe, or reach for the nearest scented candle. Picture this: you're standing in your cramped kitchen or shared flat, hearing whispered rumors of secret soap caches, or the odd vendor selling miracle water that supposedly freshens skin without the need for a full bath. These underground solutions weren't always legal or safe, but in a time of desperation, rules often bent like the wires of rationing lists. Here's the mainstream fact: the black market flourished during WWII, not only for food and clothing, but for hygiene products too. Official channels simply couldn't keep up with demand, pushing desperate civilians to trade, barter, and sometimes steal what they needed. Women, in particular, were resourceful in hunting down these elusive goods. One quirky tidbit: some women used perfume, or even lighter, fluid as a deodorizer when genuine deodorants were scarce or non-existent, because nothing says fresh like a hint of kerosene. And while this sounds like a recipe for disaster, these odd solutions often spread through word of mouth like folk remedies, becoming a strange wartime folklore. Historians still argue whether these black market goods truly improved hygiene, or just offered psychological comfort against the pervasive grime and odor of war. Sometimes it was less about cleanliness and more about maintaining a sense of dignity and normalcy amid chaos. These secret hygiene hacks extended beyond soap and water. For example, dry baths became a thing where you might rub yourself down with talcum powder, cornstarch, or even ground oatmeal to absorb sweat and mask odors. Some women developed a surprisingly expert touch at cleaning with nothing but a damp cloth and a powdery buffer. Imagine that your skin feeling fresher without a single drop of water. And then there were the steam tricks. Limited access to hot water led to makeshift steam baths, women heating water on stoves, and using towels or blankets to trap steam and open pores, hoping to refresh themselves without a full bath. This improvisation might sound charmingly rustic, but when combined with the cramped living quarters and limited ventilation, it sometimes resulted in more sweat than relief. You might chuckle at reports of women sneaking into public baths late at night, risking curfews and patrols just to enjoy a quick wash. The desire for cleanliness trumped many fears, which says a lot about the human need for comfort. So, as you quietly consider these black market bath hacks, you glimpse a wartime reality where hygiene was both a battle and a balm. A strange mix of necessity, creativity, and sheer stubbornness to stay fresh despite the odds. Remember that vinegar cleanser from our water-starved days. Here it mingles with smoky secrets and powdered tricks, painting a vivid picture of resilience. You now find yourself in the midst of military camp bathroom horrors, a place where the very idea of privacy and cleanliness is stretched to its breaking point. Picture a crowded, makeshift camp, buzzing with activity, tent walls flap in the wind, muddy paths crisscross the grounds, and the faint smell of antiseptic battles against the unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies. For the women stationed here, whether nurses, support staff, or soldiers, the struggle to maintain hygiene becomes a daily ordeal, fraught with challenges you probably never imagined. The mainstream fact is straightforward. Military camps during World War II often lacked proper bathroom facilities, with latrines and rudimentary wash stations shared by dozens, if not hundreds, of people. Hot water was scarce, and strict schedules governed access, leaving little room for personal hygiene luxuries. Yet the horrors went beyond mere inconvenience. Women faced cramped, communal showers where modesty was sacrificed to efficiency, and sometimes the water temperature was a shocking surprise, either freezing cold or scalding hot, with no in-between. The psychological toll of such conditions was significant, but so was the determination to endure. On the quirky side, some women improvised hygiene routines with humor and creativity to cope. For instance, when showers were unavailable, women sometimes resorted to sink baths, washing only the essentials with limited water and soap, then using rationed powder to freshen up. There are even stories of nurses hiding peppermint leaves or lavender sprigs in their uniforms to mask odors, a fragrant rebellion against camp realities. Historians still argue whether these harsh conditions directly contributed to higher rates of infection or illness among female personnel, or if strict military protocols and makeshift solutions kept things surprisingly under control. The challenges weren't just physical, they were social too. Sharing intimate spaces with dozens of other women meant navigating awkward moments and sometimes tense rivalries over hygiene supplies. A stolen bar of soap or a coveted spot at the wash basin could spark real drama. Imagine the subtle unspoken negotiations and alliances formed around something as simple as clean underwear. Speaking of underwear, it was often worn multiple times before washing, both because of rationing and the impracticality of frequent laundering in camp conditions. This created its own unique set of hygiene challenges and, of course, odor issues. At night, as you lay in your cot surrounded by the cacophony of camp life, you might catch yourself longing for the privacy of a hot bath at home, however rare those baths had become. The camp's lack of modern conveniences made personal cleanliness a privilege, one fought for with grit and a dash of humor. Remember those black market soap hacks? Here in the camp, they felt like distant legends, because even those were often out of reach. So as you settle into this uncomfortable but fascinating glimpse of military camp life, you appreciate the resilience and ingenuity women displayed, keeping their spirits and their hygiene as intact as possible amid chaos. As you continue wading through the gritty realities of wartime hygiene, the next challenge lands squarely under your armpits, the deodorant drought dilemma. Picture yourself raising your arm in the cramped quarters of a shared room, cautiously hoping the faintest whiff of freshness lingers rather than that unmistakable mustiness born from days without proper washing. Deodorant, that modern-day miracle of confidence and comfort, was scarce, sometimes non-existent, and women had to get creative to keep body odor at bay. The mainstream fact is that during WWII, deodorants and antiperspirants were in short supply because many ingredients were redirected for military uses. Moreover, some common deodorants pre-war contained alcohol or other volatile substances that were deemed flammable and thus restricted. This left many women without their usual go-to products. This scarcity sparked a wave of inventive and occasionally eyebrow-raising alternatives. Some women resorted to rubbing alum crystals under their arms. Alum, a naturally occurring mineral, was known for its astringent and odor-inhibiting properties. You might find it oddly refreshing, or perhaps reminiscent of a mineral spring, though probably not the spa day you'd wish for. On the quirky side, others used straight vinegar or lemon juice as a makeshift deodorant. The sharp, tangy scent masked body odor temporarily, but let's just say it wasn't for the faint of heart or nose. Imagine sitting in a crowded bus, knowing your pits smell like a citrus orchard invaded by pickles. Not exactly the aroma of victory. Historians still argue whether these wartime deodorant alternatives were genuinely effective, or if their main power was psychological, helping women feel fresher, even if the smell lingered stubbornly. After all, sometimes confidence is half the battle. There's also an interesting social twist here. The shortage of deodorant led some women to embrace body odor more openly, viewing it as a natural and inevitable side effect of the war effort. This mindset contrasted with pre-war beauty ideals, challenging norms about femininity and cleanliness. You might chuckle at reports of women applying a thin layer of talcum powder mixed with essential oils, if they had them, to their underarms, aiming for a light fragrance that didn't exist in reality. Some even used their scarves or handkerchiefs strategically, pressing them under the arms as a secret odor shield. So, as you imagine the awkward but earnest attempts to stay fresh amid deodorant drought, remember this small yet potent aspect of wartime life, where resourcefulness met reality head-on. And if you thought vinegar cleanser was wild, this citrus pitfall adds a whole new level of sensory adventure to your journey. You find yourself tangled in the tricky world of wartime hair hygiene, where shampoo scarcity forces you to rethink what clean hair even means. Imagine running your fingers through strands that haven't felt the soothing touch of shampoo in weeks, or even months, and the scent of sweat, dust, and a faint hint of something burnt clinging stubbornly to your scalp. Hair care during World War II was no luxury. It was a game of survival and imagination. Here's the mainstream fact. Shampoo was often rationed or unavailable because many of its ingredients, oils, fats, and certain chemicals were diverted to the war effort. Many women turned to plain soap or homemade concoctions to clean their hair, which, let's face it, wasn't ideal and often left hair dry and brittle. On the quirky side, some women embraced the no-poo method long before it became trendy, washing hair with water alone, or using diluted vinegar rinses to remove grease and buildup. Others resorted to brushing hair more frequently to distribute natural oils, which, in some cases, meant their hair looked shinier, but also oilier. A few even experimented with powdered substances like cornstarch or baking soda, sprinkled lightly onto the scalp to absorb excess oils. Think of it as a wartime dry shampoo substitute. Historians still argue whether these unconventional methods caused lasting damage, or if, in some ways, they were gentler than the harsh chemical shampoos that came later. The line between hygiene and hair health blurred significantly during this period. Meanwhile, hairstyles adapted to these limitations. Women often chose styles that minimized the appearance of greasy or unwashed hair. Pin curls, headscarves, and hats became essential accessories. Scarves were more than fashion. They were practical shields, hiding messy hair days, and sometimes even the occasional lice outbreak. And speaking of lice, the crowded conditions and lack of regular washing made infestations a constant worry. Treatments were limited and often involved harsh chemicals that could irritate skin or hair. The presence of lice wasn't just unpleasant, it was a health concern that added another layer to the hygiene struggle. You might smile at stories of women using tea rinses or even beer as hair treatments. These improvised solutions were often the best available, and sometimes imparted a pleasant scent or shine, much to the surprise of their users. So, as you run your fingers through your own hair tonight, Think about the resilience it took for women to keep their hair manageable, clean, and even stylish during one of history's most challenging times. Remember the vinegar cleanser from earlier? It's back again, this time as a trusty hair rinse, proving that wartime women were nothing if not resourceful. Underwear, usually your private little secret, is suddenly front and center in the wartime hygiene narrative. Imagine yourself wondering, how often do you really wash these essentials when water, soap, and time are in short supply? For women during World War II, the answer was often not as much as you'd hope. The rituals surrounding undergarments changed drastically, revealing fascinating truths about necessity, myth, and endurance. Mainstream fact: due to rationing of textiles and laundry supplies, underwear was often worn multiple days before washing. Cotton and nylon shortages meant fewer replacements, so women had to make their existing garments last. Washing machines were a luxury in many households, and hand washing was time-consuming and labor-intensive. The quirky side: a common myth held that certain materials or styles of underwear, like those made from silk or rayon, needed less frequent washing, as they were believed to breathe better or repel odors. Some women even applied talcum powder or starch to underwear to reduce moisture and odor between washes, turning undergarments into little odor control machines. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were based on genuine hygiene or more on wartime wishful thinking and social coping mechanisms. After all, scientific understanding of fabric and skin interaction was less developed, and rumors spread quickly. The laundry routine was often dictated by practicality and modesty rather than strict hygiene. Women might rinse their undergarments quickly in cold water and hang them to dry, unable to spare the hot water or soap needed for a thorough clean. This could result in lingering odors or discomfort, but it was a sacrifice many accepted as part of their contribution to the war effort. There are also stories of women rolling their underwear carefully to avoid damage and extend their lifespan, treating these garments with a reverence you might reserve for a treasured book. Repair and patching were common, buttons sewn back, elastic replaced, and hems tightened. You might chuckle at some of the old advice columns urging women to rotate their underwear regularly or to keep a clean pair reserved for special occasions, even if that meant that pair saw little use. Meanwhile, the psychological effect of wearing less than fresh underwear must not be underestimated. The smell, the sensation, it was a constant reminder of scarcity and endurance. But it also created a strange bond among women who shared these silent struggles, an unspoken acknowledgement of the sacrifices made on the home front. Remember that vinegar rinse from hair care. Imagine it doubling as a spray for underwear or clothing, a multi-purpose wartime ally. So as you think about your own laundry pile tonight, spare a thought for those women who made do with far less, weaving resilience into every thread of their undergarments. Now you venture into the quiet, often hushed topic of wartime menstrual hygiene, a subject wrapped in layers of taboo and improvisation. Imagine yourself caught between the constraints of limited supplies and the social silence surrounding periods. Women had to navigate this personal, essential routine with scant resources and little public discussion, making hygiene during menstruation a uniquely challenging puzzle. Mainstream fact: disposable sanitary products were rare or non-existent for most women during World War II. Instead, cloth pads, reusable and labor-intensive to clean, were the norm. Scarcity of cotton and fabric, as well as limited access to water and soap, made maintaining menstrual hygiene difficult. Quirky tidbit: some women fashioned makeshift pads from folded handkerchiefs, old linens, or even bandages salvaged from medical supplies. These homemade solutions were often washed by hand, dried in less than ideal conditions, and reused, which could lead to discomfort or infections if not properly cared for. Historians still argue whether wartime conditions contributed to higher rates of reproductive tract infections, or if women's resourcefulness largely kept serious health issues at bay. The silence and stigma around menstruation meant that many struggles went undocumented or unspoken. Privacy was scarce. In crowded households or military quarters, women often had to manage their periods with great discretion. Some devised clever ways to hide their supplies or changes in routine, reinforcing the secrecy that surrounded menstruation at the time. You might find it fascinating and a little amusing that some women used vinegar rinses or borax solutions to sanitize cloth pads, borrowing from broader household cleaning hacks. These methods were practical, but often left a sharp, lingering scent. Fashion also played a subtle role in managing menstrual hygiene. Dark-colored skirts or dresses helped conceal any mishaps, and women sometimes layered garments for extra security. The ever-present risk of staining added to the stress of an already difficult situation. The war's impact extended beyond supplies. It influenced attitudes too. Many women felt a heightened sense of responsibility to keep their periods under control, avoiding anything that might draw attention or interfere with work or duties. So, as you reflect on this quiet, often overlooked facet of wartime hygiene, you glimpse the resilience and ingenuity women employed to navigate bodily functions amidst hardship and silence. Remember the patched underwear and vinegar rinses. They all weave together into this complex tapestry of survival and adaptation. As the war grinds on, your skin, once a carefree canvas, becomes a battleground of wartime beauty and hygiene routines, or sometimes the lack thereof. Imagine the paradox of women striving to maintain a semblance of skin health while grappling with limited access to skincare products and a grim environment that seemed bent on testing every pore. Mainstream fact: many skincare products were scarce during WWII due to rationing of ingredients like oils, glycerin, and alcohol. Cosmetics factories often switched production to wartime necessities, leaving women to make do with simpler, sometimes harsher soaps and homemade remedies. On the quirky side, women turned to kitchen staples for their skincare needs: olive oil for moisturizing, oatmeal for soothing irritated skin, and even mashed potatoes as a face mask. Yes, mashed potatoes. The comfort food doubled as a surprisingly effective skin softener, proving that wartime women were nothing if not inventive. Historians still argue whether these homemade skincare routines genuinely benefited skin health or were largely placebo, helping women feel better amidst the stress and grime of war. Another wrinkle in wartime skin care was the persistent issue of dirt and dust. Air raids, factory smoke, and overcrowded shelters left a film of grime on skin that was tough to wash off without proper products. Women often resorted to scrubbing with abrasive cloths or using brushes to stimulate circulation, sometimes to the detriment of their skin. The scarcity of clean water and soap meant many washed less frequently or opted for quick sponge baths, focusing on key areas like the face, neck, and hands, but leaving other parts less attended. This pragmatic approach was a compromise between cleanliness and practicality. You might smile at the stories of women using rainwater collected from rooftops, believing it to be purer and gentler on skin than city water, which often carried pollutants. This hope in natural remedies extended to using plant extracts and flower waters, when available, as a form of gentle perfume and skin tonic. Fashion and makeup also intersected with skin hygiene. Wearing foundation or powder helped mask uneven skin tones and imperfections caused by stress and poor hygiene, doubling as a social armor. So as you imagine your fingertips tracing the contours of your own skin, think about the resourcefulness and quiet determination of wartime women, balancing the need to feel human with the stark realities around them. Remember the mashed potato masks and vinegar rinses. They all add flavor to the complex recipe of wartime hygiene survival. As you move deeper into this wartime world, notice how fashion silently played its part, not just as a style statement, but as a clever cover-up for the hygiene struggles women faced. Imagine slipping into a carefully chosen outfit, not just for appearance, but to hide the realities beneath. Unwashed skin, reused underwear, and those makeshift deodorants doing their best under pressure. Mainstream fact: during WWII, clothing production was tightly controlled with strict rationing on fabric and design complexity. Women's fashion became more practical, with simpler cuts and durable fabrics prioritized over ornamentation. Utility clothing was introduced in many countries, designed to conserve materials, but still keep morale high. On the quirky side, some dresses and undergarments were intentionally designed with darker colors, thicker fabrics, or patterns that cleverly masked stains and odors. Polka dots, stripes, and floral prints were more than just trends. They were wartime camouflage for everyday wear. Historians still argue whether these fashion choices were primarily driven by practicality or psychological comfort, whether women wore these styles to feel better about their hygiene, or simply because options were limited. Accessories like scarves, gloves, and hats also played an unsung role in this concealment game. A scarf could hide an unwashed hairstyle or mask a lingering smell, while gloves kept hands looking clean despite limited washing. Women also got creative with layering. Wearing slips, petticoats, and stockings helped reduce direct skin contact with outer garments, extending the wearability of clothes between washes and reducing the need for frequent laundering. You might find it amusing that some women reportedly wore 2 pairs of stockings, or even padded their shoulders to keep the shape of their clothes without frequent washing. It was all about maintaining appearances when the reality was far from fresh. This fashion hygiene intersection extended to footwear, too. Sturdy shoes with thick socks were preferred to protect feet from dirt and to hide any smells or imperfections. So as you adjust your own wardrobe tonight, consider how much of your outfit might be doing double duty, looking good, while quietly hiding life's little messes, just like it did during wartime. Remember the patched underwear and vinegar rinses? Well, here they're tucked beneath those polka dots and scarves, playing a silent but vital supporting role. You now find yourself immersed in the bustling, tense world of wartime hospitals, where hygiene isn't just personal, but life-saving and often horrifying. Imagine yourself walking the crowded corridors, the air thick with antiseptic and whispered prayers, as female nurses and patients alike navigate overwhelming challenges that stretch beyond even the usual wartime grime. The mainstream fact: WWII hospitals, both in the field and at home, were often overcrowded and understaffed, which made maintaining strict hygiene incredibly difficult. Infection control protocols existed, but were strained by limited supplies and high patient turnover, putting everyone at risk. On the quirky side, some nurses developed unique personal hygiene routines to stay sane and relatively clean amid chaos. There are stories of nurses applying generous amounts of talcum powder to mask sweat and odor during grueling shifts, or using handkerchiefs soaked in perfume to freshen their masks and uniforms. It was a delicate dance of function and a desperate grasp at normalcy. Historians still argue whether the intense conditions and hygiene limitations contributed to higher mortality rates from infections, or whether the heroic efforts of medical staff managed to keep these risks surprisingly low. Patients faced their own hygiene battles. Limited access to hot water and soap coupled with the necessity of sharing linens and communal bathrooms, meant that infections could spread quickly. Yet, many women endured with stoic resilience, finding ways to clean themselves with minimal resources. You might find it surprisingly uplifting that amidst the grim realities, there were moments of humor and camaraderie, nurses swapping jokes over makeshift washing stations, sharing advice on the best ways to freshen up with what little they had. Some hospitals even improvised hygiene corners, small areas stocked with donated soaps, powders, and lotions, becoming sanctuaries of cleanliness and comfort for weary staff and patients. So as you imagine this chaotic but vital environment, you get a vivid sense of how critical hygiene was, not just for comfort, but for survival. It was a daily battle fought with grit, humor, and whatever scraps of cleanliness could be mustered. Remember those black market soap deals and vinegar rinses. Here, they were less folklore and more a desperate reality, woven into the fabric of life-saving care. Imagine yourself now grappling with the peculiar case of wartime toothpaste and oral care. Your morning routine, something so automatic today, becomes a curious and often frustrating ritual when minty freshness is a luxury, and your toothpaste tube might be a distant dream, the mainstream fact. During WWII, toothpaste was rationed and sometimes unavailable because key ingredients like glycerin and certain flavorings were prioritized for military use. Many women had to resort to homemade pastes or simply brushing with water and a bit of baking soda. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some homemade toothpaste recipes included odd combinations like chalk, salt, and even mustard powder. These concoctions were not exactly gentle on enamel or gums, but were used out of necessity. Imagine brushing your teeth with a gritty mix that tastes more like a chemistry experiment than a fresh mint blast. Historians still argue whether these makeshift toothpastes were effective at preventing cavities, or if the lack of modern oral hygiene contributed to a rise in dental problems post-war. In many cases, brushing frequency decreased because toothpaste was so scarce, leading to a collective acceptance of less than perfect dental hygiene. You might chuckle at reports of women using tooth powders or simply rinsing their mouths with salt water when nothing else was available. The social aspect of oral care was significant too. Breath freshness was a marker of confidence, and women found ways to mask odors with gum when available, mints, or the occasional spritz of perfume. You might find it amusing that some women carried small, discreet containers of baking soda or charcoal powder to freshen their breath on the go, a wartime version of today's breath mints. So as you press your toothbrush against your teeth tonight, think about the resourcefulness and sometimes strange choices women made to maintain oral hygiene during one of history's toughest periods. Remember the vinegar rinses and black market soaps. This is just another quirky thread in that fabric of wartime adaptation. You now trudge into the gritty reality of foot care under fire, a topic that's often overlooked, but absolutely crucial when you consider the daily grind women endured on both home fronts and battlefields. Imagine standing all day in damp boots or worn shoes, the ache in your feet, a constant reminder of war's relentless demands, with little chance for proper care or comfort. Mainstream fact: foot problems were widespread during WWII, with many women dealing with blisters, fungal infections like athlete's foot, and sore, swollen feet caused by prolonged standing or marching. Medical supplies to treat these issues were limited, and proper footwear was often rationed or ill-fitting. On the quirky side, some women used home remedies like soaking their feet in vinegar or herbal infusions, believing it helped soothe soreness and fight infections. Others made their own foot powders, sometimes from chalk or talcum, to keep feet dry and reduce odors, which could otherwise become a major morale killer. Historians still argue whether the widespread foot ailments directly impacted women's ability to work or serve effectively, or if resilience and makeshift treatments mitigated these problems better than expected. Foot hygiene was complicated by rationing and the need to conserve shoes. Some women reportedly rotated shoes to allow them to air out, while others stuffed newspapers or fabric scraps inside to absorb moisture. Socks were often worn multiple days, washed only occasionally due to scarce resources. You might smile at stories of soldiers, wives, and factory workers swapping shoe care tips, or even secretly adding scented sachets inside their boots to mask odors. This small act of self-care became a quiet rebellion against wartime discomfort. Blisters and sores were a constant threat, often worsened by dirty conditions and insufficient cleaning. Yet, the determination to keep moving, to stand firm for family and country, pushed women to endure these painful conditions. So as you wiggle your toes tonight, perhaps in cozy slippers or fresh socks, spare a thought for the women who bore the brunt of war beneath their feet, often literally, and kept going with a blend of grit, resourcefulness, and a touch of scented powder. Remember those vinegar rinses and talcum tricks. They were part of a whole-body approach to hygiene, right down to the soles. The specter of disease during World War II looms large as you step into the tense world of quarantine and contagion fears. Imagine a society gripped by anxiety, not just from bombs and battles, but from invisible enemies lurking in crowded shelters, factories, and hospitals. Hygiene habits shifted dramatically as the looming threat of outbreaks forced women to adapt in ways both practical and peculiar. The mainstream fact: quarantine measures were implemented in many areas to prevent the spread of contagious diseases like typhus, influenza, and scarlet fever. Public health campaigns emphasized cleanliness, hand washing, and isolation, but resource limitations often made compliance difficult. A quirky tidbit: some communities resorted to fumigating homes with unconventional substances like sulfur or vinegar-based sprays, believing these would cleanse the air and surfaces of germs. While the scientific basis was shaky, these rituals provided a psychological comfort amid uncertainty. Historians still argue whether strict quarantine enforcement helped control disease spread, or if overcrowded living conditions and limited hygiene supplies made outbreaks inevitable. The balance between fear and practicality was a constant tension. Women found themselves at the front lines of these hygiene battles, managing household cleanliness while also caring for sick family members. Wearing face masks became more common, though often uncomfortable and hot, leading to creative adjustments like soaking masks in vinegar or mint water to freshen them. You might chuckle at stories of homemade disinfectants crafted from mixtures of alcohol, lemon juice, and salt, concocted in kitchen labs to tackle germs. Some women even boiled their clothing in vinegar solutions as a desperate measure to kill pathogens. Public messaging often conflicted with the realities of rationing, causing frustration and confusion. How do you isolate or sanitize when water is limited and soap is scarce? The paradox defined much of wartime hygiene life. So as you take a slow, deep breath tonight, think about how hygiene during war was as much about managing fear as managing germs. An invisible front where women waged daily battles armed with vinegar, powder, and sheer determination. Remember the vinegar rinses and talcum powders. They took on new significance here, becoming not just hygiene aids, but weapons in the fight against contagion. You've now reached the gentle wind down of wartime hygiene's tale, stepping into the post-war world where women began to reclaim their pre-war routines, slowly, cautiously, and with some lingering superstitions that just wouldn't quit. Imagine yourself watching as society pulls itself from the rubble, rebuilding bathrooms, factories, and the very concept of clean, all while old myths cling stubbornly like a stubborn stain. Mainstream fact: after the war, soap production and availability gradually returned to normal, and consumer goods flooded back onto the market. Women regained access to previously scarce hygiene products, and bathing and laundry routines returned to more frequent, relaxed norms. On the quirky side, some wartime hygiene superstitions lingered long after the ration books were discarded. For example, it was still common in certain communities to avoid washing hair on Sundays, or to believe that bathing too frequently could weaken the body's natural defenses, a notion born from the wartime fear of water shortages and illness. Historians still argue whether these habits were pragmatic holdovers or simply cultural relics passed down from the uncertainty of war. Many women found comfort in maintaining some restrictions, as a way of preserving hard-earned discipline or out of genuine belief. The return to modern hygiene was uneven. Rural areas often lagged behind cities, and economic disparities meant not everyone enjoyed immediate access to fresh products. Yet the overall trend was clear, a slow but steady reclaiming of cleanliness as a symbol of renewal and hope. Fashion evolved once again to embrace comfort and freshness, while old masking tactics faded. However, some wartime lessons stuck, like the value of resourcefulness, careful rationing, and appreciating the simple luxury of a warm bath or a clean shirt. So as you settle in for the night, feeling fresh and comfortable, remember the journey through vinegar rinses, patched underwear, and black market soaps that led to this moment. The resilience, humor, and ingenuity of women during WWII created a legacy of survival and adaptation that still whispers in the folds of our everyday routines. Now, dim the lights a little more, take a slow, deep breath, and let these stories settle gently around you as we drift softly toward the end of our journey through wartime hygiene. Imagine the slow return of quiet comforts, running water flowing steadily, the warm splash of a long-awaited bath, the gentle scent of soap lingering in the air like a forgotten melody. The world, once shrouded in scarcity and challenge, gradually awakens to a new dawn of cleanliness and calm. You wake up on a damp morning, the gray light filtering through a cracked window, and reach out for your usual makeup bag. But there's nothing there. The vibrant lipsticks, fragrant creams, and silky foundations that once seemed as essential as morning coffee have vanished into wartime scarcity. You're thrust into a new reality where beauty becomes a delicate dance between limited resources, ingenuity, and a stubborn will to maintain dignity amid upheaval. The story of wartime makeup shortages and skin consequences is not just about cosmetics. It's about resilience, identity, and the quiet acts of self-care women clung to when the world seemed anything but beautiful. The mainstream fact is clear. World War II caused widespread shortages in cosmetics and skincare products. Factories that once churned out beauty supplies switched gears to produce munitions, medical supplies, and military equipment. Ingredients like oils, glycerin, alcohol, and pigments were rationed or redirected for the war effort, leaving women scrambling for alternatives. Major brands faced production halts or severe cutbacks, and shelves that used to sparkle with makeup options grew sparse and uninspiring. The lipstick, once a staple of feminine allure, became something of a legend during the war. A bold red lip was not only a fashion statement, but a morale booster, a signal of vitality and defiance against bleakness. Yet, authentic lipstick was nearly impossible to come by. Some factories tried producing patriotic red lipstick made with substitute ingredients, but many women resorted to making their own. Beet juice became a popular homemade rouge, lending cheeks a faint but fleeting flush, though it could stain and fade unpredictably. Others used crushed berries or even cochineal-based dyes, though the latter was rare due to difficulty in sourcing. Foundation and face powder also suffered shortages. Talcum powder was rationed, and many women improvised by mixing cornstarch with a dash of natural pigments to approximate a smoother complexion. Unfortunately, these homemade powders sometimes irritated sensitive skin or clogged pores, leading to breakouts and discomfort. On the quirky side, you might find yourself amused at the strange concoctions women whipped up in their kitchens, turning to nature for beauty's sake. Burnt cork or charcoal, carefully crushed, served as eyeliner or mascara substitutes, creating smoky eyes in an era when commercial products were all but gone. Imagine the smoky, slightly sooty look resulting from these makeshift cosmetics, charming in its resourcefulness, but probably not the most skin-friendly. Women mixed oils like olive oil or even rendered animal fats with powdered pigments to create rudimentary lip balms or blushes. While nourishing in theory, these mixtures often left a greasy residue and attracted dirt. The balancing act was constant, looking fresh and presentable without exacerbating skin troubles caused by rationing and harsh living conditions. Mashed potatoes made a surprising appearance in this beauty arsenal. Their starch content provided a soothing mask that helped alleviate dryness and irritation caused by hard water and ration soaps. Applying mashed potato paste to the face might sound odd, but the moisture and gentle texture offered relief to parched wartime skin. This culinary meets cosmetic crossover highlights the inventive spirit women embraced when faced with limited options. Historians still argue whether these improvised routines genuinely helped skin health or merely provided psychological comfort. The harsh reality was that many women experienced dull complexions, breakouts, and dryness, intensified by poor nutrition, stress, and limited access to moisturizing products. Harsh soaps, rationed water, and infrequent bathing left skin exposed to irritants and grime, challenging even the most determined self-care efforts. Some women reported allergic reactions or skin infections resulting from the use of homemade cosmetics or recycled products. The lack of standardization and hygiene in these homemade concoctions was a gamble, sometimes with uncomfortable or painful consequences. In this environment, minimalism reigned. Women often focused on a single feature, bright eyes or red lips, to convey vitality. A dash of homemade rouge or a swipe of berry-stained lips became a personal triumph against fatigue and war's bleakness. Makeup was more than skin deep during these years. Wearing a touch of color or applying a carefully drawn line of eyeliner was an act of resistance. It was a way to claim agency when so many aspects of life were dictated by rationing, curfews, and uncertainty. For women working in factories, hospitals, or service roles, looking put together fostered a sense of professionalism and pride. Beauty routines also offered moments of normalcy and self-soothing. The ritual of cleansing the face, blending a homemade powder, or pressing a rouge brush to the cheek gave women a sense of control and identity. Even under the dim glow of blackout curtains, these small acts helped sustain morale. Interestingly, some women's groups and magazines encouraged embracing natural beauty during the war, suggesting simpler looks and fewer products. This advice was partly practical, but also reflected a cultural shift that questioned pre-war beauty standards. Yet, for many, the desire to maintain femininity through whatever means possible remained strong. Without commercial moisturizers, women turned to pantry staples for skincare. Olive oil, a prized commodity, was used to soften skin and hair, often rubbed directly onto dry hands or cracked lips. Lard, abundant in some rural areas, doubled as a night cream, though its scent could be a giveaway in shared quarters. Herbal infusions became popular, with chamomile, lavender, and rosemary waters used as tonics or afterbath splashes. These scents not only helped mask odors, but also offered a soothing sensory experience in tense times. Vinegar, a recurring star in wartime hygiene, appeared as a facial rinse to balance pH and tighten pores. Though effective, the sharp smell could be off-putting, and its use required a delicate touch to avoid skin irritation. Tea bags, often reused and cooled, were pressed against tired eyes to reduce puffiness, an age-old remedy that wartime women embraced out of both tradition and necessity. It's important to remember the war's toll on overall health. Food shortages and rationing meant many women had limited access to fresh fruits, vegetables, and essential vitamins. This nutritional deficit showed on skin as dryness, dullness, and increased susceptibility to irritation. Stress and fatigue, ever-present companions in wartime, further weakened skin resilience. Cortisol, the body's stress hormone, can exacerbate acne and delay healing, adding layers of complexity to skin health challenges. Despite these hurdles, the women of WWII found creative ways to nurture their skin, often blending science, folklore, and kitchen ingredients into their daily rituals. Public and workplace expectations added pressure to maintain a polished appearance. Women serving as nurses, factory workers, or volunteers in civil defense organizations understood the power of a confident look. Wearing makeup, even minimal, signaled resilience and capability. This was especially true in urban centers, where community morale hinged on appearances. Women who ventured outside in public often wore scarves, hats, and the occasional bit of makeup to face air raids, ration lines, and crowded public transport with dignity. The act of creating makeup also offered a creative outlet, a chance to play with colors, textures, and application techniques. It fostered a sense of community as women shared recipes and tips, passing down homemade beauty secrets like cherished heirlooms. Women experimented with plant extracts, ground minerals, and kitchen staples, turning their kitchens into makeshift cosmetic labs. This blend of necessity and creativity defined a generation's approach to beauty in adversity. Looking back, wartime makeup shortages highlight the remarkable adaptability and spirit of women. The story isn't just about what was lacking, but about how women redefined beauty standards, blending resilience with resourcefulness. These lessons still resonate. Beauty is not just products, but attitude, creativity, and self-care. The mashed potato masks, vinegar rinses, and beet juice blushes tell a story of perseverance that gently whispers through history. So tonight, as you brush your hair or dab on your favorite lotion, think of those women who, with so little, found ways to shine. Their quiet rebellion, painted with soot and berry stains, is a testament to the enduring power of human spirit. You wake up, sensing the damp chill in the air, and your mind drifts to the pile of clothes awaiting their next rinse. If only the water, soap, and time were not such precious commodities. During World War II, laundry wasn't just a household chore. It was a complex exercise in endurance, ingenuity, and compromise. The scarcity of water, soap, and fabric, coupled with rationing and constant wear, made every washing day a small war unto itself. Mainstream fact: wartime rationing severely limited the availability of soap, detergents, and washing supplies. Soap was often rationed, and the production of commercial detergents slowed due to shortages of raw materials. Washing machines, while existing, were not widespread in many homes, especially outside urban areas, and hand washing was laborious. Women faced the challenge of keeping clothes clean with minimal resources, often washing in cold water or skipping washing altogether when conditions were too difficult. The ideal of fresh, crisp laundry was tempered by necessity. In many households, laundry day was planned meticulously. Water had to be heated over stoves or fires, a task requiring fuel and time. Women used washboards, scrubbing clothes by hand with limited soap, often using homemade lye or ash soaps. These methods demanded strength and patience. You might smile at the quirky fact that ashes from wood or coal fires were commonly repurposed to make homemade soap, an ancient practice revitalized by wartime necessity. Ash soap was effective, but harsh on fabrics and skin, sometimes causing clothes to wear out faster and hands to become rough and cracked. The process often involved multiple rinses to remove soap residue, a luxury difficult to afford with scarce water. Clothes hung on lines in any available outdoor or indoor space, sometimes drying for days in damp or cold weather. Historians still argue whether the harsh washing methods accelerated the deterioration of clothing beyond what rationing alone would predict. Constant scrubbing, use of abrasive soaps, and infrequent washing cycles meant garments faded, stretched, and wore thin. Women patched, darned, and repurposed clothing tirelessly, extending the life of every item. The make do and mend mentality wasn't just about saving money. It was about survival and pride in appearance. Stubborn stains were a particular bane. Without modern stain removers, women relied on lemon juice, vinegar, or salt to lift spots from clothing. These natural remedies worked to varying degrees, but could sometimes cause discoloration. Odor control was equally challenging. In the absence of frequent washing, women sprinkled talcum powder or sprinkled dried herbs in wardrobes and drawers to freshen clothes. Some even used powdered chalk or cornstarch to absorb moisture and odors from undergarments and stockings. Laundry was often a communal activity, especially in apartment buildings or communal housing. Shared laundry rooms or public wash houses became social hubs where women exchanged tips, gossip, and moral support. You might chuckle at stories of women hiding small, precious bars of soap or ration coupons, tiny treasures guarded fiercely in times of scarcity. Women serving in military or factory roles faced even tougher laundry challenges. Many had to wash uniforms or work clothes under difficult conditions, sometimes resorting to quick rinses or spot cleaning. The stench of sweat and grease clung stubbornly, but there was little choice. In some cases, clothing swaps were common, especially when drying space was limited or washing was delayed. This practice could lead to unintended fashion, faux pas, and hygiene concerns. Wartime shortages also affected the availability of laundry equipment. Washing machines, wringers, and irons were rationed or repurposed for military use, slowing technological progress and household convenience. Some enterprising women developed ingenious hacks, using mops as makeshift wringers, heating irons on wood stoves, or creating pulley systems to dry clothes indoors. Laundry deprivation took more than a physical toll. It affected morale and social confidence. Wearing the same garments repeatedly, sometimes visibly soiled, was a reminder of hardship. Yet, the effort put into laundry routines was a source of pride and normalcy. The smell of fresh laundry, the sight of clean linens, even the ritual of hanging clothes to dry, offered small moments of victory and hope. As you fold your clean clothes tonight, think about the resilience woven into each thread. The stained, patched, and carefully laundered garments of WWII women tell a story of persistence, creativity, and silent strength. The makeshift soaps, the reused water, the multiple rinses. These details illuminate the everyday heroism behind wartime hygiene. So next time laundry feels like a chore, remember it once meant the difference between comfort and despair, dignity and shame. And as always, vinegar rinses and talcum powder played their subtle but vital roles, keeping hope fresh when the soap was scarce. the lice epidemic, battling parasites in crowded conditions. You step into a crowded wartime shelter, the muffled sounds of conversation and the ever-present hum of fear pressing in on you. Amid the ration lines, blackouts, and relentless anxiety, a less visible enemy crawls lice. For women and children packed into tight quarters, lice infestations were not just a nuisance, but a harrowing ordeal that challenged hygiene routines, social bonds, and mental well-being. The mainstream fact: lice outbreaks were common during World War II due to overcrowding, scarcity of bathing facilities, and limited access to proper washing supplies. Lice thrived in shared clothing, bedding, and shelters where regular cleaning was difficult. Quirky tidbit: women often resorted to peculiar home remedies to combat lice, ranging from the smelly and messy application of kerosene and vinegar to the more benign use of herbal rinses made from rosemary or lavender. Some used fine-toothed combs, known as knit combs, as essential weapons in the battle against these persistent pests. Historians still argue whether mass delousing campaigns were effective, or if the persistent nature of lice required more radical social changes, such as improved housing and hygiene infrastructure, to truly eradicate infestations. Lice were more than just a physical irritation. They carried social stigma. Women who suffered infestations often hid their condition out of shame, fearing exclusion or judgment. This silence sometimes allowed lice to spread unchecked. You might find it both unsettling and oddly humanizing that some women's groups held lice parties, communal gatherings where friends helped each other comb out lice and nits, turning a grim chore into a moment of solidarity and humor. The infestations complicated hygiene routines. Daily washing and laundering were often impossible, forcing reliance on partial measures. Clothes were aired out, powdered with sulfur or talcum, and isolated in cloth bags to starve the parasites. Childcare became an added challenge. Mothers had to carefully inspect and comb their children's hair, sometimes multiple times a day, while managing their own hygiene struggles. Lice also contributed to the spread of disease, including typhus, making their presence a public health concern. Military and civil defense agencies mounted delousing campaigns, setting up centers equipped with fumigation chambers and providing delousing powder. Despite official efforts, lice continued to plague crowded urban areas, refugee camps, and shelters. The problem was a stubborn reminder of how war's disruptions extended beyond visible destruction. You might smile at the ironic fact that, in some communities, sulfur baths were popular not only for their insecticidal properties, but also because the strong smell was thought to repel evil spirits or bad luck, a superstition mingling with science. The psychological toll was significant. Constant itching and discomfort led to sleep deprivation and increased stress, compounding the physical and emotional hardships of wartime life. So as you scratch an imaginary itch tonight, remember the women who combed and battled lice in crowded shelters and makeshift homes. Their resilience shining through the invisible war on pests. Remember the vinegar rinses and talcum powder. They were frontline defenses in this ongoing battle. The lice epidemic, battling parasites in crowded conditions. You find yourself in a cramped air raid shelter somewhere in London. The low murmur of voices mixing with the distant wail of sirens and the shuffling of restless feet. The air is thick with dust, dampness, and a quiet desperation. Hidden beneath layers of clothing and tangled hair lurk uninvited companions, lice. These tiny parasites became a persistent and dreaded enemy for women and children who faced not only bombs, but also the relentless irritation and social stigma of infestations. The battle against lice was a less visible, yet no less significant, front in the wartime struggle for hygiene and dignity. The mainstream fact is stark. Overcrowded living conditions, combined with limited access to hot water and laundry facilities, created ideal breeding grounds for lice infestations. Evacuated children in rural homes, families squeezed into small flats, and refugees crammed into shelters, all faced the same discomfort. With washing limited to once a week or less, lice could multiply unchecked, crawling from one person's clothing or bedding to another. The lice problem was widespread enough to prompt organized public health responses. Delousing centers were established in many cities, equipped with fumigation chambers and medicinal powders. Yet, these efforts often struggled against the sheer scale of the problem and the difficulty of maintaining hygienic conditions amid ongoing air raids and food shortages. You might raise an eyebrow at the peculiar arsenal women assembled to combat lice. Popular home remedies included soaking hair in vinegar or kerosene, though the latter was risky and sometimes led to accidental fires or burns. Other women boiled clothing or bedding when possible, while some turned to herbal rinses made from rosemary, lavender, or eucalyptus, hoping their natural scents would repel the parasites. One peculiar but widespread tool was the knit comb, an extremely fine-toothed comb used to painstakingly remove lice and their eggs from hair strands. Women spent hours, sometimes alongside their children, combing and recombing their hair, often in the dim light of blackout curtains. In some communities, women organized lice parties where friends gathered to help each other with combing. These gatherings, while born out of necessity, offered moments of laughter and solidarity, transforming an unpleasant chore into a social ritual. Historians still debate the effectiveness of mass delousing campaigns versus broader social reforms. While fumigation and powders could temporarily reduce infestations, many argue that only improvements in housing, sanitation, and access to laundry facilities could provide a lasting solution. The lice epidemic underscored the interconnectedness of public health and social conditions during wartime. lice infestations carried a heavy social stigma, especially for women, whose appearance and perceived cleanliness were closely tied to their social standing. Many women hid their infestations, reluctant to admit they were affected, for fear of judgment or exclusion. This silence often allowed lice to spread more easily, creating a vicious cycle of infestation and shame. Children were particularly vulnerable, and mothers faced the daunting task of managing their children's hygiene under harsh conditions. The constant itching and discomfort caused sleep deprivation and emotional distress, compounding the already difficult wartime realities. Beyond discomfort, lice posed a serious health risk as vectors for diseases such as typhus. The threat of typhus outbreaks added urgency to delousing efforts, especially in crowded urban centers and refugee camps. Public health authorities launched educational campaigns to encourage regular delousing, while military and civil defense units conducted fumigation of public spaces. Despite these efforts, lice remained stubborn adversaries. The ongoing war conditions, overcrowding, disrupted infrastructure, and scarcity of resources meant that lice infestations persisted throughout the conflict. Amid the scientific attempts to control lice, folk remedies and superstitions flourished. Sulfur baths, which involved soaking in water infused with powdered sulfur, became popular not only for their perceived insecticidal effects, but also because the pungent smell was believed to ward off evil spirits or bad luck. Women also applied mixtures of animal fats and herbs to hair, hoping to suffocate lice or deter them from settling. Some even resorted to shaving their heads, a drastic measure that was both practical and symbolic, a way of reclaiming control in a chaotic world. The incessant itching and the social stigma associated with lice took a significant psychological toll on women and families. Sleep deprivation, embarrassment, and the effort involved in constant combing and cleaning contributed to stress and fatigue. For many, lice infestations were a reminder of vulnerability and hardship, overshadowing moments of respite. Yet, despite these challenges, women displayed remarkable resilience. The communal lice parties, inventive remedies, and steadfast care for family members highlighted the strength and solidarity forged in adversity. As you scratch at an imaginary itch tonight, think of the millions who fought this invisible war daily. Lice may have been small, but their impact was large, touching hygiene, health, social relations, and mental well-being. Remember those vinegar rinses and talcum powders. They were not mere household items, but vital weapons in the ongoing battle against these tiny foes. The story of lice during World War II is a testament to how even the smallest adversaries shape the human experience in times of crisis, reminding us that survival often depends on attention to the tiniest details. You imagine yourself stepping into the faded, steamy world of the public bathhouse, once a hub of social life and cleanliness, now a shadow of its former self. The war's relentless pressures have changed everything. Water rationing, bombing damage, and shifting social norms have turned these communal spaces from bustling sanctuaries into places of scarcity and anxiety. For women, the decline of public baths meant more than lost convenience. It was a blow to daily hygiene, community, and personal dignity. Before the war, public baths were central to urban life, especially in working-class neighborhoods. Many homes lacked private bathrooms, making these facilities essential for bathing, laundry, and even social interaction. Women often visited the baths not just for hygiene, but to exchange news, socialize, and enjoy a rare moment of relaxation. During the 1930s and early 1940s, public baths were typically busy places with separate hours or sections for men and women, maintaining a sense of modesty and community. They offered hot water, clean towels, and sometimes even soap and other toiletries. Mainstream fact: with wartime water rationing and frequent bomb damage to infrastructure, many public baths closed or operated at limited capacity. The government prioritized water supply for essential services, factories, and hospitals, leaving baths with restricted hours or shut entirely. Damage from air raids destroyed some bathhouses, and repairs were slow due to material shortages and workforce conscription. The blackout regulations also made nighttime use difficult or unsafe. Women, particularly those working long factory shifts or caring for families in cramped quarters, found it increasingly difficult to access public baths. Waiting times grew longer, and hygiene routines became compromised. In response, women adapted by washing at home with limited water or using basins and washcloths for sponge baths. These bird baths were often cold, rushed affairs, hardly the relaxing experience public baths once provided. Some women used portable heaters or improvised hot water systems, heating kettles or basins over stoves. Others turned to sponge baths infused with scented vinegar or herbal waters to mask odors when full baths were impossible. You might smile at tales of women sharing baths with their children or neighbors to conserve water, a practice that fostered camaraderie but also raised privacy concerns. Historians still argue whether the loss of public baths contributed to a decline in overall public hygiene, or if home adaptations sufficed for most families. What is clear is that public baths were more than cleanliness hubs. They were spaces of social connection, emotional respite, and communal support. The absence of these spaces exacerbated feelings of isolation and stress, particularly for women juggling wartime demands. Bathing became a more private, sometimes shameful act, hidden behind closed doors and rationed water taps. Recognizing the importance of hygiene, some charitable organizations set up temporary washing stations, or distributed soap and towels. Mobile baths, often mounted on trucks, brought limited bathing facilities to displaced families and factory workers. Women volunteers sometimes organized group bathing times in shelters or schools, combining necessity with social support. The wartime decline of public baths also coincided with changing attitudes toward privacy and modesty. Post-war, the growth of indoor plumbing and private bathrooms transformed bathing into a more solitary, individualized routine. Some historians argue this shift led to the decline of the communal bathing culture, changing how women and society at large experienced hygiene and social bonding. As you soak in your warm bath tonight, consider the lost rhythm of public baths, the sounds of water splashing, laughter, and chatter mingling with steam and warmth. These spaces nurtured bodies and spirits in a world on edge. Their decline was a poignant marker of wartime sacrifice, not just of goods and services, but of shared experiences and simple comforts. The makeshift sponge baths, the portable heaters, and the shared towels were small but significant adaptations, reflecting the resourcefulness and resilience of women in keeping clean and connected. And of course, remember the ever-present vinegar rinses and talcum powder, quiet companions through every twist and turn of wartime hygiene. Hair removal and grooming challenges. You reach up to run your fingers through your hair, noticing its rough texture and uneven length. A subtle reminder of wartime struggles that extended far beyond the battlefield. Hair removal and personal grooming, often taken for granted in peaceful times, became complex challenges for women during World War II. With rationing, shortages, and shifting social expectations, the rituals that once defined femininity had to be reimagined, often with unexpected creativity and sacrifice. Mainstream fact: during World War II, supplies for personal grooming, razors, shaving cream, depilatory creams, tweezers, and even mirrors were rationed or in short supply. Hair removal products were considered non-essential, and many women had limited access to these items. As a result, grooming routines were altered significantly. Social pressures remained strong, however, especially for women working in factories, military auxiliary services, or roles involving public interaction. Grooming was linked not just to appearance, but to morale and professionalism. In the absence of commercial products, women turned to a variety of home remedies and improvised techniques to manage hair removal. You might chuckle at stories of using sugar and lemon juice mixtures as rudimentary waxes, though these DIY attempts were often painful and inconsistent. Some women relied on razors or blades salvaged from men's shaving kits, carefully stretching scarce supplies by sharpening blades repeatedly. Others fashioned makeshift tweezers from sewing needles or pins to pluck unwanted hairs, a slow and painstaking process. depilatory creams, which chemically dissolve hair, were rare luxuries. When available, these were often rationed strictly, leading to a black market for beauty products alongside food and clothing. Historians still argue about the extent to which wartime scarcity shifted societal norms regarding body hair. While some women embraced a more natural look out of necessity, others felt compelled to maintain conventional grooming standards, viewing hair removal as essential to femininity. The tension between practicality and appearance was palpable. Women in uniform or factory roles sometimes faced explicit or implicit expectations to remain well-groomed despite the hardships. Hair care itself was affected by rationing and limited access to products like shampoo, conditioner, and styling aids. Women resorted to homemade remedies, egg yolks, vinegar rinses, and starch sprays to clean and style their hair. You might smile at the irony of using mashed potatoes or oatmeal as hair masks, nourishing and softening the strands in place of commercial products. These culinary substitutes were a testament to wartime creativity, though results varied widely. Hairstyles adapted as well. Practicality often trumped fashion, with women adopting shorter cuts or styles that required less maintenance. Victory rolls and pin curls were simplified or replaced by buns and headscarves, serving both style and function. Despite challenges, grooming remained an important ritual for many women. It offered a sense of normalcy, control, and self-expression amid the chaos of war. Applying a slick of lipstick or carefully arranging hair could boost morale, signaling resilience and optimism. Grooming was both personal care and quiet rebellion against the deprivation surrounding them. Beauty products and grooming supplies became prized commodities on the black market. Women traded ration coupons, food, or services to obtain scarce items like shaving cream or hair dye. Bartering and sharing were common strategies to stretch resources. Friends might pool supplies or take turns using a prized cosmetic or tool. As you run your fingers through your hair tonight, consider the layered history embedded in each strand, the hardships, adaptations, and quiet courage of women who faced scarcity head-on. Their inventive hair removal methods, homemade shampoos, and simplified styles tell a story of survival and identity under pressure. And of course, remember the recurring cast of vinegar rinses, talcum powders, and mashed potatoes, trusted allies in the ever-evolving narrative of wartime hygiene. The psychological toll of hygiene deprivation. You close your eyes and try to settle into a calm rhythm, but beneath your skin lies a persistent itch, not just physical, but psychological. Hygiene, something so intimately tied to comfort and dignity, became a source of stress and anxiety for countless women during World War II. Scarcity of water, soap, privacy, and basic grooming supplies weighed heavily not only on their bodies, but on their minds. This chapter of wartime history delves into the unseen emotional burden of hygiene deprivation and its subtle, lasting effects. The mainstream fact is straightforward. Regular bathing and grooming help reduce stress and improve mental health. In wartime, many women found these rituals disrupted or impossible due to rationing, air raids, or communal living conditions. Lack of access to adequate hygiene facilities could exacerbate feelings of helplessness, anxiety, and social isolation. The simple act of washing one's face or hair was transformed from a daily routine into a stressful challenge. Historians still debate how much the inability to maintain personal hygiene contributed to psychological strain during wartime. But anecdotal evidence suggests a significant impact. Women described feeling ashamed, embarrassed, and even depressed when they couldn't keep clean, especially in crowded shelters or factories, where appearance was tied to social judgment. The stigma of odors, visible dirt, or lice infestations created a vicious cycle. Women tried to hide signs of poor hygiene to avoid ostracism, but this often made practical hygiene measures more difficult. For many, grooming was tied closely to identity and femininity. Deprivation of hygiene disrupted not just physical comfort, but personal and social identity. When hair went unwashed or clothes were worn repeatedly without cleaning, women felt a loss of control over their bodies and selves. You might find it revealing how small acts, tying a scarf, applying a bit of lipstick, or washing hands with a drop of soap, became acts of self-preservation, psychological bulwarks against despair. Community support played a vital role in mitigating psychological tolls. Lice parties, group baths when possible, and shared grooming tips offered social connection and emotional relief. Women found comfort in collective resilience, turning hygiene into a shared act of defiance. Social gatherings, even when centered around hygiene, helped break the isolation that many felt and reminded women they were not alone in their struggles. Women developed various coping mechanisms to deal with hygiene deprivation's psychological strain. Rituals like reusing a favorite scarf, applying homemade cosmetics, or practicing morning washdowns with minimal water offered a semblance of normalcy. Some women kept diaries or letters where they noted their grooming routines, reinforcing their sense of self and documenting perseverance. Poor hygiene often contributed to physical ailments such as infections, skin conditions, or lice, which in turn increased psychological distress. The discomfort of these conditions, coupled with the fear of social judgment, created an exhausting cycle. Wartime nurses and psychologists began to recognize the link between hygiene and mental health, advocating for better access to facilities and hygiene supplies as part of holistic care. Historians still discuss how these wartime hygiene hardships shaped post-war attitudes toward cleanliness, self-care, and mental health. Some suggest the experiences fostered a generation more attuned to the psychological dimensions of hygiene and self-presentation. Others argue that the stigma and silence surrounding hygiene deprivation delayed public acknowledgement of its emotional impact. As you settle into your own bedtime routine tonight, think about the invisible battle fought by so many women, the quiet struggles to maintain dignity, identity, and mental well-being through cleanliness rituals. The mashed potato masks, vinegar rinses, talcum powders. They weren't just about looking good or smelling fresh. They were tools in a psychological arsenal, protecting fragile spirits amid hardship. Your own moments of calm, cleanliness, and care are echoes of their resilience, reminders that even the smallest rituals can anchor us through stormy times. The stories you've heard tonight of vinegar rinses, black market soaps, patched underwear, and inventive deodorants are more than just oddities. They are echoes of resilience, whispered through history by women who met hardship with grace and a quiet stubbornness. They remind us how much we often take for granted. The simple act of washing, the soft luxury of fresh linens, the unspoken dignity in feeling clean. The wartime deprivation cast long shadows. It also sparked creativity and a fierce determination to hold onto humanity amid chaos. These women didn't just survive, they adapted, finding ways to care for themselves and others with whatever they had. Their legacy is a testament to the small acts of self-care that anchor us, especially when the world feels uncertain. So as your eyelids grow heavy and the soft hum of the night wraps around you like a comforting blanket, let these stories ease your mind. Let the memories of those resourceful, determined women linger gently, a lullaby of endurance and hope. Now rest easy, sweet dreams.